I accidentally touched the cold princess's bottom. She said, "Get ready and come to my quarters, human." The city he lived in, Valoria, was a marvel of alien architecture and technology. Towering buildings made of glass-like material reflected colors Ethan had never seen before. Floating vehicles zipped silently between the towers, and holographic signs projected advertisements and news in dozens of languages. For a human, it was overwhelming. For someone like Ethan, who had only learned the basics of this planet's language, every day was a challenge. Ethan worked as a translator for interplanetary visitors. His job was meant to be simple, help humans and aliens communicate. But more often than not, it threw him into unexpected situations. On this particular day, he had been sent to deliver a message to Princess Selara, a high-ranking figure in Valoria. She was known throughout the galaxy as the Cold Princess, not because she was mean, but because she was calm, composed, and almost impossible to read. People said she could look at someone and know their deepest intentions without them saying a word. To meet her was an honor, but it also terrified Ethan. He had spent hours rehearsing what he would say. He practiced bowing politely, speaking in the proper formal tone and controlling the nervous twitch in his hands. He was ready, or at least he thought he was. When he finally entered the royal hall, it was even more magnificent than he had imagined. The ceiling stretched so high that it seemed to disappear into the clouds above, and crystal chandeliers floated in midair, radiating soft, glowing light. The floor was polished and mirrored, reflecting Ethan's own anxious expression. In the center of the room stood Princess Selara. She was taller than most humans and had a striking presence. Her hair shimmered like silver moonlight, and her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She wore a gown that seemed to float around her, as if the air itself obeyed her commands. Ethan's heart pounded as he stepped forward. He tried to bow, but in his nervousness, he misjudged the distance and tripped slightly, bumping against the princess. It wasn't anything serious, but it was enough to make her raise an eyebrow. Ethan froze, his face burning red. "I am so sorry, princess," he stammered, stepping back quickly. He tried to speak properly, but his words tumbled out awkwardly. "I did not mean to touch you." Princess Selara's expression didn't change. She simply regarded him with that cold, unreadable look. Then slowly she spoke. "Ethan," she said, her voice calm and even, "come to my quarters later. We need to talk." Ethan's mind went blank. "Your quarters," he repeated, unsure if he had heard correctly. "Yes," Selara said, turning and walking gracefully toward the exit. "Be prepared. I want you there within the hour." Ethan swallowed hard. The hour stretched endlessly in his imagination. What did she want to talk about? Was he in serious trouble? He tried to calm himself, pacing in the royal hall and watching the guards move silently along the walls. Every detail of the palace seemed sharper and more intimidating now. The walls, the decorations, the way the chandeliers floated, they all reminded him that this was a place far beyond Earth, a place where humans were small and out of place. Finally, he left the hall and returned to his tiny apartment in the lower district of Valoria. The streets outside were crowded with aliens of all shapes and sizes. Some had wings, some had scales, and some had more than two eyes. Ethan had long ago stopped staring, but today the crowd seemed heavier, more alien, more intimidating. He kept imagining Princess Selara's calm, unreadable face, and he could feel his anxiety rising again. He spent the next hour preparing. He reviewed every detail he could remember about her, from her speech patterns to her preferences. He rehearsed what he would say and how he would behave. He wanted to show respect, to show that humans could be capable and intelligent, and maybe, just maybe, to show her that he could be trusted. When the hour finally came, Ethan stepped out of his apartment, adjusted his clothes nervously, and headed to the royal quarters. The path through the palace was familiar to him by now, but it felt longer than usual. Guards nodded politely as he passed, but he barely noticed them. His mind was consumed by what awaited him. When he arrived at the door to the princess's quarters, he paused. The doors were massive, made of shimmering metal that seemed to shift in color as the light touched it. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. Then, with a trembling hand, he knocked lightly. "Enter," came a voice from inside. Calm, commanding, and completely unreadable, Ethan pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was elegant, but unlike the grand hall, it felt personal. Soft light filled the space, and there were books and devices arranged neatly on tables. Princess Selara sat at a desk, looking at him with that same steady gaze. She gestured for him to approach. "Ethan," she said again, "sit." He did as told, keeping his back straight and his hands folded in his lap. He could feel his heart racing, but he tried to appear calm. "You are here because of an accident," Selara said finally, her voice calm but firm. "Accidents happen, and I understand that, but you are on a planet where one mistake can lead to serious consequences. I need to know if you understand that." I understand, Princess," Ethan said quickly. "I promise it was unintentional. I respect your rules and your space, and I would never, ever disrespect you again." Selara studied him for a long moment. Then she leaned back in her chair, her expression softening just slightly. "Humans are different from my people," she said. "You think quickly, act with emotion, and often act before thinking. That can be dangerous here, but it can also be interesting." Ethan blinked. "Interesting?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I want to see how you handle challenges. Humans have a resilience and adaptability that my people often lack. You make mistakes, but you also learn quickly. That is why I have summoned you." Ethan's fear began to shift slightly into curiosity. "You want me to do something?" Selara nodded. "Yes. There is a task I need help with. It is delicate and important. If you succeed, you will earn trust not just from me, but from the entire court. If you fail," she paused, letting the words hang in the air, "then you will learn the consequences of carelessness." Ethan swallowed, trying not to show his nervousness. I will do my best, Princess." "That is all I ask," Selara said. "Come prepared, observe carefully, think carefully, and remember your humanity is your strength, not a weakness. It is what makes you capable of seeing what others cannot." With that, she handed him a small device that looked like a miniature holographic projector. "This will guide you," she said. "Use it wisely." Ethan held it in his hands, feeling its weight and the responsibility it symbolized. He nodded, understanding the importance of this moment. This was not just about a simple mistake. This was about proving himself in a world where humans were small and fragile, yet capable of extraordinary things. As he left her quarters, Ethan felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and determination. He had no idea what the task would involve, but he knew one thing for certain: he had to succeed. Not just for Princess Selara, but for himself, and for all humans who would be judged by their actions in this alien world. The sun, or what humans might call the sun, was setting over Valoria, painting the city in hues of orange and purple. Ethan paused on a balcony, looking out over the shimmering towers, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. The task ahead was unknown, the risks were high, but he also felt something he hadn't felt since arriving on this planet: hope. He had made a mistake, yes, but in the universe, mistakes were only the beginning of a story. And for Ethan, this was the start of a story he intended to finish with courage, intelligence, and the unmistakable strength of being human. Ethan returned to his small apartment, still clutching the holographic device Princess Selara had given him. Its surface shimmered with faint light, and tiny symbols danced across its interface, reacting to his touch. He had no idea how it worked, but instinct told him that this was not just a tool. It was a guide, a key to completing whatever task the princess had planned. He sat at his table, staring at the device. For hours, he experimented with it, pressing buttons and touching the holographic symbols. Nothing dangerous happened, but the device projected maps, images of alien creatures, and strange patterns he could not immediately understand. Ethan realized that learning to use this device would be as important as completing the task itself. As night fell over Valoria, the city changed. The floating lights of vehicles created trails of colors in the sky, and the streets glowed with soft neon. The air was cooler now, and Ethan felt a strange mix of awe and anxiety. He had been in this world for months, but nights like these reminded him just how small humans were compared to the vast, alien technology and intelligence surrounding them. Suddenly, the device lit up in a bright blue hue. Ethan's heart jumped. A holographic projection appeared above it, a figure of Princess Solara herself, pointing to a location far beyond the city. A message in her language, which the device automatically translated into basic English, appeared. Observe, report, learn, prepare for the challenge. Ethan nodded to himself. He didn't fully understand, but he had learned one thing about this planet: observation was crucial. One wrong move could bring failure, but careful watching could reveal opportunities humans might not notice. The next morning, Ethan made his way to the coordinates shown by the device. The area was outside the city limits, where towering spires of crystal rose from the ground like frozen waterfalls. The air here was different, thicker, cooler, and faintly tinged with an electric energy. It was as if the planet itself was alive, humming with power. Ethan stepped carefully through the crystalline forest, noticing the patterns on the ground. Tiny creatures scuttled through the cracks, glowing faintly as they moved. Some resembled insects, but their movements were far more intelligent, as if they were communicating silently with each other. Ethan watched quietly, careful not to disturb them. His human instincts were useful here. Humans could move subtly, observe patiently, and notice small details that the aliens around him might overlook. After several hours, Ethan reached a plateau overlooking a valley. Below him, strange machines moved across the landscape. They were enormous, with long legs and arms, working in ways that seemed almost magical. Ethan realized they were gathering energy from the planet itself. The technology was unlike anything humans had ever created, yet it was beautiful in its complexity. Ethan activated the holographic device. A map appeared, marking certain areas with glowing red symbols. The device highlighted paths that seemed safe to traverse and areas to avoid. Ethan followed its guidance, moving carefully across the crystalline terrain. Each step required attention. One misstep could send him tumbling down jagged crystal formations. Hours passed, and as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Ethan noticed something unusual. A group of the planet's native beings, tall and elegant with translucent skin and luminous eyes, was approaching the machines. They seemed concerned, communicating in a language Ethan could not understand. But the device reacted. It projected a sequence of symbols, suggesting that these beings were likely the cause of potential interference with the machines. Ethan knew that Princess Solara would expect him to report everything accurately. He began recording observations, noting every detail about the creature's appearance, movements, and interaction with the machines. Humans were observers by nature, and in moments like this, that trait gave them an advantage. He could see things these aliens might not consider important, yet those small details could make a huge difference in understanding the planet. As the day progressed, the beings seemed to notice him. One of them approached cautiously, its glowing eyes fixed on Ethan. He froze, remembering all the times he had been told not to act hastily. Slowly, he raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace. The creature stopped and studied him, tilting its head in curiosity. Ethan remembered the lessons from Princess Solara: stay calm, observe, and think carefully. He slowly reached for the device and projected a small, harmless light pattern. The creature's eyes widened in recognition, and it stepped back, motioning for the others to do the same. Ethan exhaled silently. He had managed to avoid confrontation, but he knew this was only the beginning. The projection from the device changed, showing new symbols and paths. It seemed the aliens' activity had triggered a series of reactions in the machines below. Energy pulses began to rise from the ground, flowing along channels that glimmered like liquid crystal. Ethan realized that whatever task Princess Solara had planned, it involved both observation and action. He would have to understand the patterns of these beings and the machines to succeed. Night fell again, and the valley below shimmered under the light of two moons. Ethan found a small, flat area on the plateau and set up a temporary camp. He ate a simple meal, reflecting on the day's events. Despite the challenges, he felt a sense of accomplishment. Humans could survive in alien worlds, adapt to strange customs, and even learn the secrets of technology far beyond their own. His resilience was what made him capable, and his curiosity would help him solve the challenges ahead. The next morning, Ethan woke to a startling sight. One of the creatures had returned, standing at a distance and watching him. This time, it did not approach immediately. Ethan realized it was waiting, assessing him. He remembered what Princess Solara had said: humans think and act differently. Perhaps this creature was testing him in its own way. He decided to respond carefully. He mimicked the creature's movements slowly, showing no threat and signaling understanding. The creature's posture relaxed slightly, and it moved closer. Ethan observed every detail: the way its limbs bent, the patterns on its skin, the faint glow that pulsed in rhythm with its breathing. He recorded everything in his notes, knowing that these details could help him complete his task. Hours passed as Ethan studied the interactions between the creatures and the machines. He noticed patterns. Certain machines activated only when the creatures moved in specific ways. The energy pulses were synchronized with their gestures. Ethan realized that the creatures were not interfering randomly. They were interacting with the technology in a sophisticated, almost artistic manner. This realization sparked an idea. If humans were capable of analyzing patterns differently, perhaps he could predict the creatures' actions and use that knowledge to stabilize the machines. It would be risky, but Ethan had learned that risk and observation often went hand in hand. He tested his theory carefully, projecting a light pattern from the device to mimic the creature's movements. The machines responded exactly as he predicted, confirming his observations. Ethan felt a surge of excitement. For the first time since arriving on this planet, he truly felt that his human mind had an advantage in this alien world. Days passed as Ethan continued to study the valley, the machines, and the creatures. He grew more confident in his understanding of the patterns and began to anticipate potential problems before they occurred. His resilience, patience, and intelligence allowed him to navigate a world that many humans would find impossible to survive in. One evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Ethan noticed a change. The creatures began moving toward the machines in a coordinated manner he had not seen before. The energy pulses intensified, and the ground beneath the machines vibrated faintly. Ethan realized that the task was entering its most critical phase. He had to act, or the delicate balance he had observed would be disrupted. He activated the device fully, projecting a complex sequence of light patterns to guide the creatures safely and stabilize the machines. The creatures hesitated, then began following the projections. Ethan's heart raced as he adjusted the sequence in real time, reacting to the creatures' movements and the machine's responses. It was exhausting, but he could feel his human adaptability at work. Finally, after what felt like hours, the machine stabilized, the energy pulses calmed, and the creatures retreated to a safe distance. Ethan collapsed to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. He had succeeded where many would have failed. His human mind, with its creativity and resilience, had turned a chaotic situation into a controlled outcome. As he packed up his camp and prepared to return to the city, Ethan felt a sense of pride. He had proven to himself at least that humans could survive and even excel in alien worlds. Princess Selara's words echoed in his mind. Your humanity is your strength, not a weakness. Today, he had truly understood what she meant. The journey back to the city was quieter, calmer. The stars above Valoria sparkled like diamonds, and Ethan felt a connection to this strange, beautiful world. He knew that more challenges awaited him, but he also knew that he had the skills, intelligence, and courage to face them. Humanity had survived on Earth for millennia, adapting to countless challenges. Here, on this distant planet, Ethan would carry that same resilience forward. And he knew that when he returned to Princess Selara, he would not just be a human who made a mistake. He would be a human who observed, learned, adapted, and succeeded. A human who could face the unknown and turn it into something extraordinary. Ethan returned to Valoria, carrying the weight of both fatigue and accomplishment. The city's towers glittered under the twin suns, reflecting the light like 1,000 shards of crystal. Despite the splendor, he could not relax. Princess Selara's task had tested him, and he knew that her challenges were never given lightly. Every assignment was designed to test a human's adaptability, intelligence, and courage. Today, he had survived and succeeded. But tomorrow promised new trials, and each one would be more difficult than the last. He walked through the bustling streets, trying to blend in. Humans were still rare in Valoria, and people often stared when they saw him. Ethan had grown used to this, though. He had learned long ago that in alien worlds, blending in sometimes meant survival. He adjusted his jacket, trying to make himself appear calm and confident, even though his mind raced with thoughts of what Princess Selara might have planned next. When he arrived at the royal palace, he was greeted with a quiet nod from a guard. No words were spoken. It was a silent acknowledgement of his presence. Ethan reminded himself that here, respect was earned through actions, not words. His previous success had earned him a degree of trust, but he knew it was only temporary. The princess's challenges were continuous, and one mistake could erase every bit of confidence she had in him. Inside the palace, Ethan was escorted to the strategy room. This room was unlike the rest of the palace. It was functional, practical, and filled with holographic maps and data streams. Princess Selara stood in the center, her eyes fixed on a glowing projection of a distant region outside the city. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He had been called here not to relax but to prepare for the next mission. "Ethan," Selara said, her voice calm and precise, "you performed well yesterday. You observed, you analyzed, and you acted with intelligence, but observation alone is not enough. Today you must demonstrate understanding and strategy. Are you ready?" Ethan swallowed and nodded. "I will do my best, Princess." Selara motioned toward the projection. "There is an energy anomaly in the western sector of the planet. Our scouts report unusual activity. I want you to investigate and provide a full report. Identify the source, analyze the patterns, and if possible, stabilize the situation." Ethan studied the map carefully. The western sector was largely uninhabited by intelligent species, but the terrain was rough, jagged mountains, deep canyons, and frequent storms. This would be a difficult journey, especially for a human unfamiliar with the planet's hazards. Yet, as always, he felt a spark of determination. Humanity had survived in extreme environments on Earth, and Ethan had already learned to adapt to this alien world. He could do this. He packed his equipment, including the holographic device, which had become essential to his missions. Its projection system allowed him to analyze patterns and predict outcomes, giving him an edge even in unfamiliar terrain. He also carried supplies for survival: food, water, and protective clothing designed to handle the planet's unpredictable climate. The journey to the western sector was long and exhausting. Ethan traveled by a small, hovering vehicle provided by the palace, navigating through narrow canyons and over jagged cliffs. The sky darkened with storm clouds, and the air was charged with electricity. Ethan had to focus constantly, adjusting speed and trajectory to avoid sudden gusts of wind and unstable rock formations. After several hours, he arrived at the source of the anomaly. The landscape here was unlike anything he had seen before. Crystalline towers, similar to those near the city, rose from the ground, but they were fractured and unstable. Energy pulsed through the cracks, creating sparks and flashes of light. The area was dangerous, yet fascinating. Ethan approached carefully, taking notes and recording data with his device. He noticed faint traces of movement in the distance, small, swift creatures darting between the crystalline towers. They seemed drawn to the energy, but their actions were erratic and unpredictable. Ethan understood that they were likely reacting to the anomaly, but their behavior also held patterns if one looked closely. As he observed, Ethan began to notice synchronization. The creatures' movements influenced the energy flows, causing pulses to shift in rhythm with their actions. It reminded him of what had happened in the valley during his first challenge. The creatures were not causing the anomaly intentionally. They were interacting with the environment in ways their species had evolved to do. Ethan realized he needed to stabilize the situation carefully. Acting too quickly or recklessly could cause the entire structure to collapse, creating a massive surge of uncontrolled energy. He began analyzing the patterns with his device, projecting holographic models of the energy flows and the creatures' movements. The more he studied, the more he understood the subtle relationships between them. Hours passed, and Ethan's observations turned into a strategy. He projected gentle guiding patterns with the device, mimicking the natural movements of the creatures while redirecting the energy pulses toward stability. It was precise work, requiring constant attention and adaptation. Every time the creatures changed their path, Ethan adjusted the holographic projection, testing responses and correcting errors. The storm above intensified, adding another layer of difficulty. Lightning struck nearby crystalline towers, sending shards of energy into the air. Ethan shielded himself, remaining focused on the task. His human resilience, the ability to stay calm under pressure, think logically, and adapt quickly, was proving essential. Aliens might have strength or advanced technology, but humans could observe, improvise, and respond in ways others might not anticipate. By late evening, the energy anomaly had stabilized. The creatures had returned to their natural routines. The energy pulses flowed smoothly, and the fractured crystalline towers were no longer at risk of collapse. Ethan collapsed to the ground, exhausted but triumphant. His body ached, but his mind was sharp and satisfied. He had used human ingenuity, patience, and courage to succeed where many might have failed. As he prepared to return to Valoria, a movement caught his eye. One of the creatures approached, glowing faintly in the dim light. It did not attack or flee. Instead, it observed him curiously. Ethan remembered how observation had helped him succeed. Slowly, he raised a hand in acknowledgement. The creature hesitated, then dipped its head in a gesture that felt almost like respect. Ethan smiled faintly, understanding that he had earned a degree of trust in this alien world, not through force, but through careful thought and action. The journey back to the city was calmer. The storm had passed, leaving the western sector bathed in soft, silvery moonlight. Ethan reflected on the day's events. He had faced danger, analyzed patterns, and adapted to circumstances beyond his training. Each success reinforced the truth Princess Selara had told him. Humanity's greatest strength was its ability to learn, adapt, and persevere. Upon returning to the palace, Ethan was escorted directly to Princess Selara. She was waiting in the same strategy room, her calm eyes assessing him. "You returned," she said simply, her tone neutral but not unkind. "I stabilized the anomaly," Ethan reported, showing the data he had collected. The creature's interactions with the energy were predictable once I observed the patterns. I guided the flows, and the situation is stable. Solara studied the projections, her expression unreadable. After a long moment, she nodded. Excellent. You are learning quickly, Ethan. Observation, analysis, and adaptation. These are skills humans possess naturally, yet you are using them in ways that surpass expectation. Your humanity allows you to see solutions that others might overlook. Ethan felt a swell of pride. He had worked hard, endured stress and danger, and proven that humans could thrive even in alien environments. Yet he also knew that this was not the end. Princess Solara's challenges were continuous, each designed to test new abilities and push boundaries. Your next task will build on today's success, Solara continued. Observation and strategy are essential, but now you will face a challenge that requires action and leadership. You must learn not just to react, but to influence outcomes directly. Are you prepared for that? Ethan nodded without hesitation. Yes, Princess, I am ready. Solara gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Good. Humanity is remarkable not because it is the strongest or the fastest, but because it can think, adapt, and persevere. That is why you are here. That is why you are capable of success where others might fail. Ethan left the strategy room, carrying the weight of responsibility, but also a newfound confidence. He had faced danger, studied alien behavior, and stabilized an energy anomaly using intelligence and adaptability. He had proven that humans were capable in ways that were sometimes underestimated by other species. That night, he walked through the city streets, observing the alien citizens as they moved about their lives. He noticed patterns in their behavior, rhythms in their routines, and small details that others might ignore. His mind worked constantly, analyzing and connecting dots. He realized that every challenge he faced was not just a test of skill, but a lesson in understanding the world around him and the unique abilities humans brought to it. Ethan returned to his apartment, tired but determined. He knew that tomorrow would bring new trials, greater responsibilities, and more opportunities to demonstrate the strengths of humanity. He reviewed his notes and observations, planning for the next stage of his journey. The city outside glowed softly in the night, a reminder that this world, though alien, was full of possibilities for those willing to observe, learn, and act wisely. And as he drifted to sleep, Ethan felt a quiet sense of purpose. He was no longer just a human trying to survive on an alien planet. He was a human capable of understanding, adapting, and excelling, a reminder that even in the vastness of the universe, humanity's strength could shine. The next morning, Ethan awoke with a renewed sense of purpose. The successes of his previous tasks had given him confidence, but he knew that Princess Solara's challenges were designed to stretch him further. This time, the task was not only about observation or strategy, it was about leadership. He would have to guide others, coordinate actions, and take responsibility for outcomes that affected more than just himself. The idea both excited and unnerved him. Humans were not always naturally commanding, especially in alien societies, but they were adaptable. Ethan had learned that much on this strange world. After a quick breakfast, he packed his supplies and checked the holographic device Princess Solara had given him. It glowed softly in his hands, its interface waiting for him to interact. The device had already begun projecting a map of a region in the southern hemisphere of the planet, a sprawling network of cliffs, valleys, and natural energy conduits that pulsed with faint light. According to the projection, there were multiple groups in the area that required his attention. These groups were not human, nor were they entirely alien in the sense Ethan was familiar with. They were semi-intelligent creatures whose actions affected the balance of energy across the region. Ethan's task was clear. He would need to lead these creatures in a coordinated manner to restore stability to an area disrupted by natural and unnatural forces. The creatures were unpredictable and the terrain was hazardous, but if he could succeed, he would demonstrate not only human intelligence but also human courage and leadership. The journey to the southern hemisphere was long. Ethan navigated the rugged terrain with the aid of a hovering vehicle, carefully monitoring the device's projections. Storms swept across valleys, and sudden shifts in wind and gravity challenged his control of the craft. Yet he persevered, reminding himself of the lessons he had learned. Observation, patience, and adaptation were essential. Humans had survived countless challenges on Earth, from harsh climates to complex social environments. This was simply another opportunity to apply those skills in a new context. When he finally reached the area, he found it in chaos. Crystalline towers, similar to those he had seen before, were fractured and misaligned. Energy pulses surged uncontrollably, causing instability in the surrounding terrain. The semi-intelligent creatures moved frantically, unaware of the consequences of their actions. Ethan took a deep breath and reminded himself of the task. He would need to guide these creatures, not command them. Humans were capable of influence through understanding and empathy, and he intended to use every ounce of that ability. He activated the holographic device, projecting sequences of light and sound patterns designed to mimic the creatures' natural communication. The device amplified subtle signals in the environment, allowing Ethan to interact with the creatures in a way they could understand. At first, the creatures were wary, some retreating into the shadows of the fractured towers. Ethan stayed calm, adjusting the patterns and moving slowly to show he posed no threat. Slowly, the creatures began to respond, matching his projected signals with their own movements. As the day progressed, Ethan discovered patterns in the creatures' behavior. Some were naturally cautious, observing before acting. Others were impulsive, moving quickly and reacting to immediate stimuli. Ethan realized that his success depended on tailoring his guidance to each group's behavior. For the cautious creatures, he used gentle signals and allowed them to follow at their own pace. For the impulsive ones, he projected more dynamic patterns to channel their energy productively. The terrain added another layer of challenge. Jagged cliffs and unstable energy conduits required careful navigation. One misstep could have catastrophic consequences, not only for Ethan but for the creatures and the surrounding ecosystem. He moved with precision, adjusting the projected patterns in real time to account for shifting energy flows and unexpected behavior from the creatures. Hours turned into a full day, and Ethan began to feel the strain. His body was exhausted, but his mind remained sharp. Leadership, he realized, was not just about giving orders. It was about understanding, adapting, and anticipating. He observed how each creature reacted to his guidance and adjusted accordingly, creating a network of coordinated movement that gradually stabilized the energy pulses. By nightfall, significant progress had been made. The creatures moved in a synchronized manner, the fractured towers became stable, and the energy flows were beginning to return to equilibrium. Ethan took a moment to observe the results of his efforts. He had guided rather than commanded, influenced rather than forced, and adapted rather than imposed. Humanity's strength, he reflected, lay in this ability to understand, innovate, and persevere in situations that others might find impossible. As he set up a temporary camp for the night, a strange sense of pride washed over him. He was not just a human on an alien planet. He was a human capable of leadership, problem-solving, and influence. He had taken beings far different from himself and worked with them, using observation, empathy, and intelligence to achieve a complex goal. During the night, Ethan recorded his observations in detail. He noted the responses of different creatures, the timing of energy pulses, and the impact of environmental changes. These notes would be essential for reporting to Princess Selara and for preparing for the next phase of his tasks. As he wrote, he realized that humans had a unique perspective in this alien world. Unlike the native species, humans could analyze, improvise, and connect disparate observations into coherent strategies. This perspective was invaluable in navigating challenges that seemed insurmountable to others. The next morning, Ethan resumed his work. He continued to refine the synchronization of the creatures and energy flows, ensuring that the stabilization was permanent. Small adjustments in the projected signals led to significant improvements in coordination. He noticed that even the creatures that had initially been resistant were now participating actively, responding to his guidance with precision. Ethan felt a sense of connection with these beings, a silent acknowledgement that his understanding and leadership had earned their trust. Midday brought an unexpected challenge. A sudden energy surge caused one of the larger crystalline towers to shift, threatening to destabilize the entire area. Ethan acted quickly, projecting a complex sequence that guided the creatures to absorb and redirect the excess energy safely. The plan worked and the tower stabilized. The creatures responded instantly, moving as a coordinated unit, demonstrating the effectiveness of Ethan's leadership. Exhausted but determined, Ethan continued his work until evening. By the time the twin moons rose over the horizon, the area was fully stabilized. The energy pulses flowed smoothly, the crystalline towers were secure, and the creatures had returned to their natural routines. Ethan sat back, observing the results of his efforts. He had turned chaos into order through intelligence, patience, and leadership. As he prepared to return to the city, Ethan reflected on what he had learned. Leadership was not about domination or fear. It was about understanding, guiding, and influencing. Humans had an advantage in this regard because they could observe, adapt, and innovate in ways that others could not. Today had proven that. Upon returning to the palace, Ethan was immediately summoned to Princess Selara. She was waiting in the strategy room, her calm eyes fixed on him. "You have returned," she said, her tone neutral. "Report your findings." Ethan presented the data, explaining how he had observed, analyzed, and guided the creatures to stabilize the energy flows. He detailed the challenges posed by the terrain, the behavior of the creatures, and the unexpected energy surge. Princess Selara listened silently, her expression unreadable. After a long pause, she spoke. "Excellent. You have demonstrated not only intelligence and observation, but also leadership. You adapted to complex and dynamic conditions and influenced outcomes through understanding rather than force. That is exactly what humanity is capable of. You have shown that your species can excel in environments that others would find impossible." Ethan felt a surge of pride. He had faced danger, chaos, and unpredictability, and he had succeeded. He realized that humans were not just survivors. They were problem solvers, innovators, and leaders. On this alien world, those qualities were invaluable. Selara continued, "Your next challenge will test your ability to combine all the skills you have learned so far: observation, strategy, and leadership. You will face a situation where you must coordinate multiple groups, manage complex variables, and act decisively. Your humanity will be your greatest asset, and your adaptability will be tested to the limit." Ethan nodded. He understood that his journey was far from over. Each task built on the last, preparing him for greater challenges. Yet he also knew that he had grown stronger, more confident, and more capable with each success. That night, as he walked through the city streets, Ethan reflected on his experiences. He had faced danger, chaos, and unpredictability, and had succeeded through intelligence, patience, and adaptability. He had led beings far different from himself, proving that humans could understand, guide, and influence even in the most alien circumstances. He returned to his apartment, reviewing his notes and observations. The city outside glowed softly under the twin moons, a reminder that this world, though alien, was full of opportunities for those willing to learn and adapt. Ethan felt a quiet determination. He was no longer just a human trying to survive. He was a human capable of leadership, innovation, and extraordinary achievement. As he drifted to sleep, he thought about the challenges that awaited him. Each task tested a different aspect of his abilities, pushing him to grow and adapt. Yet he felt ready. Humanity's resilience, intelligence, and courage had carried him this far, and he knew they would carry him further. The universe was vast, filled with unknowns and challenges, but Ethan understood that with observation, strategy, and leadership, humans could rise to meet anything. And as he closed his eyes, he made a silent promise to himself to continue learning, adapting, and proving that humanity, no matter how small or out of place it seemed, could face the stars with courage and succeed where others might fail. Ethan woke early that morning, his mind sharp despite the fatigue from the previous challenges. The past few days had tested him in ways he never imagined: observation, analysis, strategy, and leadership. Each task had demanded his full attention, and each time he had succeeded, his confidence had grown. But today, he knew, would be the ultimate test. Princess Celara had hinted that this mission would combine everything he had learned so far and push him beyond his limits. After a simple breakfast, Ethan packed his supplies carefully. His holographic device, which had become almost an extension of his own mind, hummed softly in his hands. The projection glowed, showing a map of a distant sector, far from the city. The terrain was unlike anything he had encountered. Massive chasms, jagged cliffs, and strange, floating formations that pulsed with energy. The region was also inhabited by semi-intelligent creatures, similar to those he had guided before, but in larger numbers and with more unpredictable behavior. Ethan knew that this would not be a simple task. He would need to observe, analyze, strategize, and lead simultaneously. Humans were capable of all these things, and today he intended to prove it. The journey to the sector was long and challenging. Ethan navigated his small hovering vehicle over turbulent air currents and jagged rock formations. Storm clouds gathered above, crackling with energy, and the wind threatened to throw him off course. But Ethan's previous experiences had taught him patience and focus. He adjusted the controls carefully, observing the environment and the device's projections, anticipating the obstacles before they appeared. When he finally arrived, he was confronted by chaos. The floating formations moved unpredictably, energy pulses surged in irregular patterns, and hundreds of creatures moved frantically across the terrain. It was clear that this region was out of balance, and one wrong action could lead to disaster. Ethan took a deep breath, recalling all that he had learned: observation first, then analysis, followed by strategy, and finally action. He began by observing the creatures and the environment. Some of the creatures were cautious, staying near the edges of cliffs and floating formations. Others were impulsive, darting unpredictably through the air. Ethan noted their patterns, behaviors, and interactions with the energy pulses. He also observed the floating formations, realizing that their movements were connected to the energy surges. One formation shifted slightly, and a pulse of energy flowed through a nearby chasm. Another moved, and creatures scattered in response. After careful observation, Ethan began analyzing the situation. He projected holographic models of the energy flows, mapping the creatures' movements and the floating formations' patterns. Slowly, he began to see connections, sequences, and rhythms that could be predicted and influenced. The device allowed him to simulate potential interventions, showing him how small adjustments could stabilize the energy without harming the creatures. Next came the strategy. Ethan devised a plan to guide the creatures, stabilize the energy flows, and prevent the floating formations from colliding or causing further chaos. He divided the creatures into groups based on behavior: cautious, balanced, and impulsive. Each group would receive tailored signals from the holographic device, designed to guide their movements without causing panic. Simultaneously, he would project sequences to influence the floating formations, synchronizing their movement with the energy pulses. Ethan's heart raced as he began to implement the plan. He activated the device fully, projecting light and sound patterns across the terrain. The creatures reacted cautiously at first, some ignoring the signals, others following them tentatively. Ethan adjusted the projections in real time, responding to every unexpected movement. Humans were capable of improvisation in a way that many alien species were not. His ability to think quickly and adapt to changing circumstances was now his greatest asset. The storm intensified. Lightning flashed across the sky, striking near the floating formations and sending energy pulses surging through the terrain. Ethan remained calm, focusing on his task. He adjusted the projections, redirecting energy surges safely and preventing the creatures from panicking. His heart pounded, but his mind was precise, analyzing every variable and responding with skill. Hours passed as Ethan worked tirelessly. The creatures gradually responded more consistently to his guidance, moving in synchronized patterns that stabilized the energy flows. The floating formations began to move predictably, their pulses harmonizing with the environment. Every small success gave Ethan confidence, but he knew the real challenge was maintaining control over the entire system simultaneously. Suddenly, a massive energy surge erupted from one of the chasms. The ground shook, and several floating formations were thrown off course. The creatures scattered, some clinging to edges, others leaping into unstable positions. Ethan's mind raced. He had anticipated many scenarios, but this was the most dangerous situation yet. One misstep could trigger a chain reaction, destabilizing the entire sector. Ethan acted quickly. He divided his attention, projecting rapid sequences to guide the creatures back to safety, while simultaneously adjusting the floating formations' movements. He used every skill he had learned: observation to detect shifts, analysis to predict outcomes, strategy to coordinate actions, and leadership to influence behavior. His human adaptability shone through, allowing him to manage multiple variables at once. The creatures responded, following his signals precisely. The floating formation stabilized, and the energy surge dissipated safely. Ethan exhaled slowly, realizing that he had successfully averted disaster. Yet he knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The system was delicate, and he needed to ensure permanent stability. Over the next several hours, Ethan worked tirelessly, fine-tuning the projections and guiding the creatures. He observed how minor adjustments could have major effects, and he learned to anticipate not only the creatures' movements, but also the energy pulses and floating formations' behavior. His human ingenuity allowed him to connect patterns that others might overlook, creating a harmonious system where chaos had once reigned. As night fell, the sector began to stabilize. The creatures moved in coordinated patterns, the floating formations pulsed rhythmically, and the energy flows were smooth and controlled. Ethan felt a sense of accomplishment unlike any he had experienced before. He had taken a chaotic, unpredictable environment and, through observation, analysis, strategy, and leadership, turned it into order. Exhausted but satisfied, Ethan set up a small camp on a flat formation overlooking the stabilized area. He reflected on the day's events, realizing how far he had come. He had faced challenges that tested every skill humans possessed: intelligence, courage, adaptability, and the ability to lead others. He had proven that even in a world far beyond human experience, humans could succeed where others might fail. The next morning, Ethan returned to the city, carrying detailed reports and recordings of his actions. Princess Celara was waiting in the strategy room, her calm eyes assessing him. Ethan presented his findings, explaining how he had observed, analyzed, guided, and stabilized the sector. He detailed the creature's behaviors, the floating formations, patterns, and the energy flows dynamics. Celara studied the data silently, then finally spoke. "Ethan, your performance surpasses expectation. You have demonstrated observation, strategy, leadership, and adaptability. You have taken a chaotic environment and created order where none existed. This is the essence of human capability: intelligence, courage, and the ability to adapt and succeed against impossible odds." Ethan felt a swell of pride. He had not only completed the task, he had exceeded it. He realized that humans were not defined by their physical strength or speed, but by their ingenuity, resilience, and adaptability. These qualities allowed them to overcome challenges that other species might find insurmountable. Princess Celara continued, "Your journey has shown that humans are capable of extraordinary achievement. You think differently, adapt quickly, and persevere where others might fail. That is why humanity can thrive, even in worlds far from its origin. You have proven that your species' greatest strength lies in its mind, its courage, and its determination." Ethan nodded, understanding fully the weight of her words. He had faced danger, chaos, and unpredictability, yet he had succeeded through intelligence, patience, and perseverance. He realized that his journey was a testament not only to his own abilities, but to the potential of all humans. As he left the palace, Ethan walked through the city streets, reflecting on the lessons he had learned. Observation, analysis, strategy, leadership, and adaptability were not just skills, they were the essence of what made humans remarkable. On this alien world, he had proven that humans could thrive, influence outcomes, and achieve the extraordinary. That night, under the twin moons of Valoria, Ethan looked up at the stars. He felt a deep sense of connection to the universe and to his own species. Humans were capable of more than survival. They could understand, innovate, and excel in ways that others might not imagine. He had faced the ultimate challenge, and he had succeeded. Ethan knew that more challenges awaited in the future, but he also knew that humanity's resilience, intelligence, and courage would carry him through. He had learned to observe carefully, analyze deeply, strategize wisely, and lead with understanding. He had turned chaos into order and demonstrated that even a single human could make a profound difference in an alien world. As he drifted to sleep that night, Ethan felt a quiet pride and determination. He had proven that humanity, no matter how small or out of place it seemed, could face the stars with courage, intelligence, and resilience. And he knew that wherever the universe took him next, he would continue to observe, learn, adapt, and succeed. Ethan's journey had begun as a human trying to survive in a strange world, but it ended as a human who had demonstrated the full potential of his species. Through every challenge, he had shown that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its physical form, but in its mind, its courage, and its determination to overcome the impossible. And with that knowledge, he felt ready to face any adventure the universe might send his way.